We are now live.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the Ukiah Unified School District Special Board Meeting of May 27th. We apologize for the delay. We're live on Facebook, but we will be storing this in our regular YouTube channel as well. And could we please ask staff to put up a little written announcement on the YouTube page that says, please go to Facebook? Thank you so much. Okay, two quick announcements. We are allowed to meet by teleconference by Zoom because of the emergency executive order of March 12th by the governor for COVID-19. And this is a special board meeting, which was properly noticed solely to address the item of approval for reductions to supplemental concentration grant funds, so no other business can be conducted. May we have a roll call, please, Ms. Ornelas? And a reminder that we need to mute if we're not talking.
Okay, Trustee Barrett.
Here.
Trustee Fernandez.
Here.
Trustee Diaz.
Here.
Trustee Nelson.
Here.
Trustee Van Sant.
Here.
Trustee Arkin.
Here.
Trustee Molgard.
And I am here as well. Thank you. We will now have our flag salute. Ready, begin. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible,
indivisible,
with justice
with
and liberty
and justice for all.
for all.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I so move.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none. There's a little feedback going on, so again, if you can mute, please do. I said my notice of special meeting pursuant to the Ralph M. Brown Act, Government Code Section 54956, before it was time for me to say it. So, duly noted. We will now go into the one main item, operational systems. And what we talked about last time was the need to make some cuts. And what we're going to do is we're going to quickly review the strategic focus page, the policy guidelines, the larger issue, the small list, then the big list. Then we'll have further discussions, and finally we'll take a vote that is direction to staff. So, Superintendent Cuban.
Yes, and just as a reminder to our viewers, because of the governor's May revise, education is getting a significant cut to our 2021 funding. It's equivalent to 7.92%, which for Ukiah Unified is approximately $6.3 million reduction for next year. Because of the great fiscal smartness of our board in increasing our reserve, we're able to use some of our reserve next year and some additional one-time funding, in addition to not filling some open positions to try and get through next year, so that we have more time in the fall to develop a well thought out plan starting in 21-22. So as part of that plan that was presented at the last board meeting, it requires reductions in supplemental concentration grant action items of our target is approximately, or is at least $750,000. And so we have some attachments for you. One is the policy guidance that was in the last board meeting. You took a straw poll vote and gave us direction to support this policy guidance. And so our decisions about supplemental concentration grant funding are wrapped around that. And so we did go through our overall supplemental concentration grant budget, which is the document that has multiple colors on it, and it is 3 pages, 2 stapled pages. And then, so we did go through that, and we came up with a smaller list using our the policy guidance as our guide to recommend to the board. And this is this 1-page document. It has 20 items currently on it, and these are all attached to the board agenda. We tried very hard to stay with our goal of not having to impose summer layoffs this summer at this time. And most of these things are either items, such as over the past 7 years, we've purchased library books every year, so we would hold on that for next year. Or they're contracts with outside contractors. So, and we gave you $986,000 of potential reductions for you to consider. You can either accept those, you can remove some. You can also go back to this 3-page document and say, hey, I think we should consider X, Y, or Z and add it to this shorter list. We did review this with our principals, and they are in support of it. And I talked with Lisa and Terry, our UTA president and our CSEA president today. But all of these are in line with the policy document that we discussed. And so I don't know if you want me to go through each of these. One note, we did keep in bold the items that were planned to be new for next year. And we would not obviously do those things if they're on this list. So I don't know if you had any questions about this, if you want me to go over each of them, Trustee or President Molgard.
I think maybe we'll walk through them and just see if people have questions. Maybe we can do it that way. So just to clarify, that which is in bold on our 1-pager is number 2, number 6, number 14, and number 18. Those are things that were planned to be new this year, this upcoming August.
That is correct.
Okay, all right. So starting at the top, purchase library books. Any questions? Just raise your hand or speak up as soon as you can, because I'll be looking at everybody on the Zoom, but let us know. Reading and math incentives, trimester meetings for pre-KK teachers, Imagination Library, a fabulous program, and if you'd like to hear my hour spiel about it, please contact me privately. Student Success Coordinator.
And to clarify, President Molgard, we have 2.25 FTE open positions. We would just not fill those for next year. So We're not talking about eliminating all of those. We're just keeping with our theme of not filling certain vacancies.
Right, so you'd look over there in the right column that says 2.25, not the 12.25. Right. Fund STEM education with equipment and PD. Okay, secondary musical instruments and cleaning. That does not mean the end of the music program. It just means 1 year without anything new. Arts Attack and art materials for each site. Does anybody want to channel former board member Gail Monpere? Hearing none, okay. Contract for VAPAC 6 and SV.
This is our contract with Space that we've had for the last several years. So we would eliminate that contract, unfortunately.
Okay, and then teachers would be doing more of their own PE and activity stuff.
And one reason for the thinking about this is we don't really know yet what school is going to look like in the fall. We are exploring, we hope that we are fully back. That is our goal.
Mm-hmm.
But we also don't know what that's going to look like for the fall.
Okay. We also don't know what's going to happen with the PSAT and the SATs, so skipping that for a year. The Title VI counselors, also known previously as the Title VII counselors, to assist students who are Native American.
So we had a .8 position that was grant funded and the grant went away. The .8 has been super hard to recruit for and continue because it is a part-time position. And so we're suggesting that for next year, we not fill that position. It is a vacancy.
So that's something that I personally would want to come back to in a moment. Care team coordinators elementary. That was just a supplemental that was given to teachers to organize those. Suspension, alternative to suspension classrooms. We talked about this last time. Since there is no appropriate teacher ready for Eagle Peak, we would not fill it at Eagle Peak, but we would continue adelante with Pomalita and with the high school. Questions? No, okay. Peer-to-peer programs? I don't know that one.
This is funding to support different peer projects at secondary schools.
Okay.
They're peer generated. Students generate these projects. They've varied throughout the years.
Okay. Provide funds for school safety. Would perhaps our bond be involved in that?
Yes, it is. We have language in our bond that supports school safety, like fencing. Those are the types of things that we've used to fund this: fencing, additional cameras at school sites, but that can be covered through bond funds.
Okay. Support parent education programs, childcare, food. That would be a 50% reduction. PLC celebrations and incentives would be down to 0. What is it this year?
It's 0. This is a new item.
Okay, you're right. It's in bold. I should have known that. Yeah, cover this one. These last two that are negative, you'll notice they're negative numbers. So that actually means we're putting money into them. Could you go over those for us?
Yes, the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant was one of the funds that was reduced by the state. So we received the grant, but the funding was reduced. Now we're still waiting to hear from the state because it's technically funded in 1920. We think we may get the full amount, but we're not 100% sure yet. So as a precautionary, we put that, when we got the grant, we put that money back into supplemental, or we took it out of supplemental concentration grant funding because it was going to be covered through the grant. And now that that money is reduced, we have to, it's the difference is $71,000 that we need to put back in to be funded out of supplemental concentration grant funding, because we are not getting that amount of grant funding to continue to fully support our CTE program as we have had it. I know it's confusing. It's a confusing accounting. And we should know more about whether or not it's considered out of this year's money and we're going to get the full amount, or next year's money in the next week.
Okay, that's pretty quick.
We may have more of a savings if we actually get the full amount. And then the $7,000 is just a salary difference in the person we hired into this position.
Happen to have more years of experience than you had guessed when you made the budget. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so on this, I'd like to come back to number 12. What other items would people like to review? Yes, Van is here.
I wanted to look at the, I may want to come back to this after we look at the 3-page document. I had some questions about the 3-page document, and then maybe there would be a swap out is what I was considering.
Yes.
Because there's a few things on this one page that I hate to see go, but it would depend on whether we found something on the 3-page that we would feel comfortable replacing it with.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so let's look at our 3-pager then. Remembering that our goal is the strategic plan and COVID-19 and taking advantage of one-time funds, which we normally don't do. And our 3-year goals for the strategic plan are college and career readiness, social emotional well-being, and focus on equity. Okay. So what is the most efficient way to look at the 3-pager, I wonder? Well,
Well, clarifying questions about some items on it.
do people want to just focus in on where the questions are, or do you want us to walk through it?
It'd be kind of long to walk through.
I wanted to read each item. Okay.
Let's focus on questions.
Trustee Van Sant?
So I had a question about summer school. It looks like we're still planning on funding summer school at 260,000, and I didn't know if we were planning on doing summer school, and I feel like you've talked about this before, but I couldn't remember.
What page and where are you?
I don't know. I too many things up at one time. I don't, maybe first page? Let me try to find it.
We will find it for you. It's $260,000, I believe, Trustee Van Sant. And we left the funding. So what we're doing for summer school this summer is we're doing extended school year for special education. It is legally required. And then we're also doing credit recovery for high school students. So if they've failed a class, they can do credit recovery through Cyber High School. We know that that program will not cost $260,000, but we want to keep the funding there because we want to potentially be able to use it during the school year to beef up after school support or during the school day support for kids who may have lost learning this year because of remote learning.
By the way, that's on page 2, about 10, 12 lines down, under equity after school.
I guess my thought then, Deb, is that seems very rational, but I'm wondering if we might want to be more transparent about that and show that, because it show the actual estimated cost of summer school and a corresponding amount for making up for learning loss is sort of what you're talking about in a sense, right? But perhaps that activity about the learning loss would be happening during the school year rather than the summer.
Yes.
So moving on, I guess my second question was about the assessment teams at 75,000, and I don't know, so many things are up in the air. Are we going to be held to those same assessments in the beginning of the year, do you think? Because if we're not, let's not fund them. Or do we just not know?
Katie, can you address that?
Currently, the guidance that we've gotten from the state is that assessments will continue next year. So the EL assessments and the standardized assessment, obviously that could change, but that's what we know right now.
Okay, it's just something to keep an eye on. If it turns out not to do that, that frees up 75,000 or some portion of that.
Agreed.
I would imagine assessments could be even more important if children aren't being taught by their teacher every day.
Yeah, I could see it going either way. And yeah, in one sense, I think the EL assessment might be really important, but I just didn't know what kind of rules will be in place next fall.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my third question was about the school resource officer. I see that, if I'm remembering, this is the high school school resource officer, not the second one, what I call the second one. So this is the first one, sort of.
Correct.
But do we know whether that second one is going to be given back to us or not? Because if it's not going to be given back to us, I'd like to see that reflected as well, or maybe we don't know.
Can we put that on the June agenda, Trustee Van Sant? Because I would like to talk about that. You know, we've got some potential modifications to the MOU. So the board knows, because since we've been out of remote learning, this particular position, as you all know, the second school resource officer was pulled back into detective duty in January. So we haven't been charged for that position for the second semester. And then with this position, the Ukiah High, the school resource officer who's housed at Ukiah High, that position, which is funded out of supplemental concentration grant funding, we are not being charged the full amount for that either for this semester because of because we've had no school. So we appreciate the work with the city and the police department on that.
Were those savings, Mr. Barrickman, included in your end of year projections?
Some of them were. I don't know. We don't have the final accounting yet, so we were pretty generic, I think, still.
Mm-hmm. I think you're going to be right. You both said last time that you think that the end of year is going to look with more savings than you were even showing last time. And you're both nodding still that's your impression. Okay. Thank you.
So, President Mulgard, those were my only questions, and given the responses, it doesn't look like any of those three things I brought up would be appropriate to reduce right now. So I'm done for now.
Okay, but I did note that on the summer school program, rather than summer school program / learning loss recovery, maybe you want to put and learning loss recovery. Maybe that makes it more clear that it's year round.
That's a great suggestion.
Have any, I'm
Ann?
yeah, okay.
Okay. I'm glad you paused. Thank you. I just wanted to chime in. I really like Megan's idea for the summer school program to really be transparent about we're really saving that money for another area that's super important. So I would like to back her on that suggestion. So thank you, Megan, for that. The other item, and I know we've discussed this a little bit, but I thought it'd be worth a little bit more discussion, is the math and STEM TOSA. This is something I was really excited about. I know math is one of our important things that we really want to tackle next year. I am extremely concerned about adding a new program in the current state, and I just wanted to hear a little bit of why we should keep that particular position since we haven't started it yet.
And where is that on our sheet, please?
That would be page 1 under math and science, about halfway down the page.
I see.
Trustee Nelson, the reason why is we really tried to stick with our focus, and our one-year goal next year is math. And this position will assist with math. And so we tried not to touch much related to math. And Katie, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, as we were looking through, we wanted to continue our focus on math, and we may need even more support next year as if we have to have alternative types of learning. So we think that will be very helpful next year.
Trustee Barrett? Trustee Barrett, you're muted. Thank you.
I had a concern about that also. I just think the wisdom of filling a new position when we don't even know what school's going to look like next year is a real concern to me. Also, I understand what you're saying about the math concern. I have a real concern about math also. But when we look at our policy guidance, in number 2, protecting positions that are in the classroom, general education, special education teacher, technology, etc. I'm not sure that that new position fits there. Also, I'm concerned about it continuing out for 21, 22, and 22, 23 without a chance, if we go ahead with it next year, to evaluate whether or not it was worthwhile.
That the math STEM TOSA might look so different next year because of how we're delivering learning, that it might not have a good analysis to it after year 1. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying, we don't know how useful this position's going to be. So I'm just concerned about I'm concerned about having it next year and then about continuing it in the budget when we don't know how it's going to work out.
Trustee Nelson?
I guess that I would just add to Carolyn, I share the same concern about it's incredibly difficult to cut a position because it impacts somebody directly that we know. And to have, again, I'm concerned about spending new money. I really appreciate where our kids are at. I'm concerned about adding to the budget when we're in the state that we're in. I think I already said that. I'm sorry for repeating myself. But to see it also go on for those years without some sort of, it's easier to cut a program, I think, if it's for a year long and it's not already in the budget. It's cutting a position is just extremely painful because it directly impacts a human being.
Trustee Van Sant?
I feel like I might have forgotten what I was gonna say. I think yeah, let me come back to it.
Hold that thought. Superintendent Cuban?
I was just going to add, because we filled this position, we would need to open up the summer layoff window and lay it off, which we can certainly do. I know when the board approved this position, there was a lot of discussion about it and whether or not it should be for 3 years or 1 year. I personally think that in year 2 and 3, there's a lot that's going to change. We know that we have, unless things change financially, we have to reduce out of this budget $1.4 million. Right now, we're trying to aim for $750,000. So I certainly couldn't guarantee past next year, but I'd like to see us hold on to it for next year to support math.
Now, Trustee Van Sant?
Yeah, I'm remembering what I was thinking. My feelings about this position are mixed, but I'm inclined to support it. Partly because although I strongly feel we need to protect the classroom and the classroom teachers as much as possible, and that's the position I would have in a normal environment where we had a sudden crisis of funding. That would definitely be what I'm thinking. Because next year, as much as we all are hoping this is not going to happen, I think will likely involve some component of remote learning. As little as possible in my opinion, but something will happen with remote learning. I'm feeling like there may be a stronger role for these TOSA positions than, particularly the ones that are focused on a specific instructional practice, than I had originally anticipated. So I would hope that if we retain this position and we are in periods of remote learning next year, that the expectations of this position are super focused on that support particularly. Because I think that our teachers who've all had to suddenly change the way they do their instructional practices could use as much help as they can get, honestly, on that kind of thing. I just think that's been a real hard transition for a lot of our teachers, totally understandably. So that's just my conflict with this position. I actually am seeing, in some ways, I feel a stronger sense of support for it, given that we might have to do periods of remote learning.
Okay. Trustee Arkin?
I'm a little bit confused about this position. It's hard for me to see that bringing it in that it could be a helpful position to continue when things might be in flux, and that bringing this position is a really important one that we've been talking about, that we've really needed to have. And you guys have done a really good job to be as stable as we can, but it seems to me throwing them into the mix, which is constantly mixing around, I don't think it's fair to the person nor the position, because if we end up having to get rid of more of our money, that would be a position that we might go at because it doesn't fully develop and we don't have And so it would not be fair to bring them on. At least when we do new positions, we give them a year, 2 years to see how it works. But this would be quite a mix for me, I think. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Trustee Diaz or Trustee Fernandez, any opinions about the math and STEM TOSA at this time?
I think if we hadn't hired somebody already, I would feel differently, because I too didn't, before I realized we'd hired someone, I had some reservations because the timing doesn't seem great. But since we hired somebody, I would just continue with it, knowing that it may only be a one-year position.
Yeah. Trustee Barrett?
I would like to ask Deb, has that position, the person's position been filled?
Nicole? I believe so, but Nicole would know.
Yes, it has been.
It has been filled.
Okay.
I guess I would suspect that the person who's taking this position probably understands how precarious the position is. So one would expect that they should know. We may not be able to retain it as long as maybe we would normally want to in a normal environment.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think depending on what next year looks like, right, many teachers and staff will
right. All bets are off really until we have more information, right, which we won't have for a long time. Yeah.
Right. Right. All right. So we've looked at the summer school learning loss, school resource officer, assessments, math and STEM TOSA. Anything else from the 3-pager that people would like to put up for consideration? Doesn't mean you're going to vote against it, but just for any discussion. Yes, Trustee Barrett.
I just have a question on the second page under positive culture and well-being. The social emotional counselors, it says the grant was received and 1 FTE is being funded and then 1 FTE is new. So this is, so are we looking at 2 new positions? Is it 1 new position? And where is that position going to be? Just curious about that position.
It is 1 new position. So the grant enabled us to continue that position for 3 years. So it's an additional position beyond that. And the counselors are organized according to, they all serve different school sites as a team approach. And Katie, I can't remember how this has been organized, but they serve these counselors serve our secondary schools primarily. And so we did, based on the guidance from the last meeting, remember that we had to lay off a counselor position at the last meeting or 2 meetings ago because we weren't quite sure where we were headed because of the budget. This policy right here, the one that we talked about last week, where it says to preserve counselors, we did move forward with rescinding that layoff notice, or we're in the process of it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so hearing no other thoughts, let's go back to our 1-pager then. The one I'm most concerned about is item 12, the Title VI counselors, specifically for Native Americans, reduced by 0.8 FTE because it's been difficult to fill because it's a 0.8. I know we're supposed to be looking at reductions, but I'd actually like to encourage us to increase it by a 0.2 so that we had a full-time equivalent in that position. We have made some strides. Then when you look at the subcategories of our standardized tests, Native Americans have improved in a few of the categories. But in general, we have not yet adjusted our school system enough to those children, and we have not given them the support they need to be successful. Overall, their achievement is not what it should be. And so to cut even a 0.8 at this point, I just see that as a huge difficulty, since our third strategic focus goal is a focus on equity. I mean, there's no other group that more needs help to achieve equity than our Native American students.
And that's why the board has options and choices. You'll note that we've exceeded our $750,000 goal, but of course, everything that we saved this year will help us in 21-22. Again, this has been a very difficult position because it's part-time to hang on to. So if the board wanted to increase it to full-time, certainly you could absolutely do that. It would help us attract somebody if it were a full-time position, but as a 0.8, it's extremely difficult. And
can you remind me, Deb, is that position filled right now? I wasn't totally hearing that.
It is a vacant position. And
Oh, okay.
It used to be grant funded.
So that person, it was grant funded, but that person left voluntarily or whatever, and or they were laid off.
The person was hired into a full-time position in our district, another full-time counselor position.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now I'm not sure what to think. I mean, Anne, I hear what you're saying. I could go either way on this in terms of like, I agree with the general concept that I don't want to neglect, and more importantly, I'd like to augment funds for our most vulnerable populations, but I also want to make sure that the positions and the programs are being as effective as they should be. And I don't know if this is a moment to review how they're being used. I mean, I can't tell that administratively if this would be an opportunity to do that. And I guess I do know that a counselor you can hire at any point during the year, right? So it's not quite like a teacher position that you'd need to get hired right in the beginning of the year.
These counselor positions require a pupil personnel services credential, and they are sort of on the same cycle as teachers and administrators in terms of the hiring process.
Oh, I see. Okay, so there would be an advantage to hiring in the beginning of the year because otherwise you'd be looking at people who had been not hired by other. Okay, I get it. I see. Okay, I guess I don't know what to think.
I feel like I'm sort of in the same boat. I can completely see why we would, but it's hard to sort of swim upriver when we're trying to cut. We're in the mindset of cutting. So I'm kind of at a loss here.
Well, to me, the situation is, I guess there's two different points, and maybe I'm asking for too much here. But for me, the situation is, we're not cutting directly anybody who works with our most vulnerable students. We're not cutting anybody from special ed. We're not cutting anybody from those who work with the homeless, those other subcategories who are also having a hard time. So why we would be cutting this one, I just don't get it when we have more than enough money to afford it. And the 0.8 to a 1.0 thing, that's the whole thing that we talked about for years when we first joined the board of, then let's get the dang bus drivers to have a part-time paraprofessional job or something, just so that they would have benefits and we'd be able to recruit them. So I think whenever we can go to 1, we end up with a higher quality employee than when we're going in 0.8, unless you just happen to hit somebody with a family who has another working partner or something, but that doesn't happen very often.
You know, Anne, I want to point out, we didn't fund the family homeless liaison position that was supposed to be funded this year. And I was really sorry to see that be crossed out on the 3-page list. So, I mean, you started out saying we're not cutting any positions that were identified for vulnerable populations. And it's true, the homeless liaison we haven't had in the past, but to me, I was imagining that being a really important position. So in some ways, I'd rather see us, if we're going to retain this position, and I don't know if that's possible, but I'd like to see maybe combining it with that homeless foster liaison concept as well. For that, maybe it's too many, I don't know, it's too many populations to mix at once. I don't know if you can do that with funding sources, but I was sorry to see that position not end up being funded.
And as a reminder too, we also did not fill a special ed coordinator position. Just in terms, yeah.
But it had also been open for a year.
Right.
Did not work directly with children.
Well, it's been open. We currently have that position filled. The person is leaving, and we've been trying to recruit for the replacement. So it will be open for next year.
Other thoughts? Trustee Barrett?
I agree. This is a real quandary. I certainly think we don't service our Native American population enough. I also think this is a real important position, but we do need to cut. I don't know.
Well, I just want to say that what's been presented to us is at 986,500. We'd have to get to 750. So even if we put in the entire 131 back in, we'd still be $100,000 more cut than we actually need. So what they gave us was more cuts than are needed, just to be clear. So even though we're pulling from the 3-pager to add in anything we want to add, we don't have to add anything, and nor do we have to do all of this right now. Now, of course, sooner cuts save us more in the long run, of course.
And
Trustee Van Sant and then Superintendent Cuban.
Well, maybe Superintendent Cuban can go first in case it informs what I was about to say.
No, I was just going to also add in advocating for this position, and I'm with all of you who in our policy guidance, it does say that we're going to preserve positions that support the social emotional health of our students, and this one certainly would.
Okay.
I was going to suggest something that might be a terrible idea because it's too like wishy-washy, but I wonder, you know, we have said before that there are some positions that finding the right person is so important that we sometimes don't fill them if we can't find the right person. I'm wondering if we go ahead with filling this full-time position, we kind of have that same guideline in mind that this needs to be a really fabulous find. And if we're not feeling like this is a really great person fit for this job, we let it sit a little bit longer. I mean, that might be too wishy-washy, but I just know that I also don't want to fill a position with someone who's not fabulous, I guess, for this population, just because we said we wanted to fill it, you know. I mean, we don't always have that luxury. Like, you need a first grade teacher, and at the end, you know, when it's getting close to August 12th, we'll take almost any first grade teacher that comes along. So I'm just wondering with this position, if we can have a real careful lens on how we hire if we decide to retain it.
Well, I think that's a good comparison between a classroom teacher that you need for 24 kids who are going to show up that day. It is a different, we can afford to have a different level of scrutiny. So you might be interested, for example, in making a motion that funded this, that said a 1.0 FTE with special attention to finding the right, the best candidate, the most qualified candidate.
Again, yeah, similar to what we've done with those, you know, those justice, whatever, the restorative justice positions. I mean, we've deliberately left them unfilled if we haven't found the right person.
Right. Okay. Okay. I saw a hand. There we go.
Again, I'm really concerned about this year and next year and the year after that. What does this position actually do? Let me back up. We can't find enough counselors. We need more counselors for everybody in our district. I fully support the counselors. What does this counselor specifically do?
This counselor serves Native American students at Pomalita and Oak Manor. That's what the assignment has been. provides direct support to students and their families. You know, follows up academically with the students, gets resources to kids and families, provides social emotional support as well.
This is but it's specifically for that population. So they have this counseling plus the other counseling that's already at the school.
This counselor specializes in Native American students and their families.
Deb, how do you feel about bringing it back? Do you feel like we're getting too close to our bottom line?
I'm conflicted. I do think that we can never have enough counseling support. We hear it every year from our kids and families. And so I feel like because we've exceeded our target, and we don't know what's going to happen next year, and we don't know if we're going to have federal funding, I would be comfortable having it as long as we could make it full-time. But we know that we may have to, in the future, eliminate it. But I'm comfortable. And it does certainly support our, you know, our policy guidance direction document that the board worked on at the last meeting. But I of course, we want to hire a great person, and we will not fill it with somebody who's not great.
Yeah. Any other questions for staff? Trustee Nielsen?
You can call me Tyler. Steve, I hate to put you on the spot, but as far as funding goes, it's weird for me that we're adding to the budget. I'm just curious, how much is 100,000? What do we say, $120,000 or $130,000? How much does that impact us? Are you in favor of adding to the budget or taking away from the budget? I'm not sure exactly what I want to know. Is that a lot of money, a little money? Should we be concerned?
I think given all the uncertainty right now, if it's the right thing to do, based on what we know, there's not a reason not to do it, I guess. And that's not a very strong answer, but there's just so much uncertainty. Yeah, any dollar we save now helps us in the long term, but that could all go away a week from now. We may not have to make any cuts, right? So I think, again, trying to take care of next year's students with next year's money, I think it's a tough choice.
Yes, Trustee Van Sant.
So if I'm reading between the lines, I feel like Mr. Berkman and our superintendent have probably prepared for us the worst case scenario, which would be what they should do. Right. So in light of that, I'm comfortable with retaining that position as 1.0.
I'm comfortable with that. Trustee Barry?
But I tend to be less fiscally conservative than others.
For that too.
I'm comfortable with that position. I think I am pretty fiscally conservative, but I really, I know that this population can use all the counseling support they can get. Mm-hmm. So I'm in favor of it.
Okay.
I am in favor of it too.
Okay.
You know, the important thing to me is what Deb said, and that is we're not going to just fill it with anybody. It's going to need to be somebody good. And this is a really needed position for that population. And if we could find somebody good, that it would really be worth it, because it'll be very lasting for our kids. So I'm assuming if we find someone, it's because they're good, and therefore I'm glad about that.
Okay. So I don't want to cut off any questions, but if there aren't any more, I would be looking for a motion for approval of the proposed CSG reductions for board consideration on the one-page sheet. That
Could you
pulls out item number 10 from this sheet, and that includes the full funding for item number 12.
I would make that motion that are we ready to make motions? Are you asking me to make a motion?
I'm just saying, if there's no other questions, I keep looking. I don't want to cut anybody off, but I'm not seeing any more questions.
So I would go ahead and make a motion that we approve the proposed SCG reductions for board consideration. For the moment, setting aside number 10, and which is the contract for visual and performing arts, and adding, modifying number 12 to include, rather than reducing by 0.8 FTE, we'd actually increase it by 0.2 FTE.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Trustee Diaz seconds. Trustee Arkin?
I have a question.
Good.
So are we saying that we're keeping 10?
No, I should clarify.
No, one of our board members informed us that they have a conflict with number 10, so that we're going to take that vote separately.
Oh, so we're only voting on 12.
No, we're voting on everything but 10.
Okay, say it again.
We're voting on everything but 10.
I get it. Okay. Wait a minute, propose, okay, so, and the way, but the way Megan put it is, so instead of that one, number 12 will be added back on, okay. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what it is, and we're taking out at this point 10.
We're setting aside voting on number 10 for the time being.
Yeah.
We're gonna vote on number 10 separately.
Yes, I get it. Okay.
Is there any public comment, Ms. Ornelas, about this item?
We've received no public comment.
No public comment at this time. Okay. Any other clarifications needed on this motion? Okay, then I will call the motion. All those in favor? Aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. So passed, and thank you, staff, for all your hard work of putting this together. I'm sure it was a lot of work in a very short amount of time. Discussion of the recommended item number 10, contract for visual and performing arts. Any discussion about that or questions of staff? Were there any alternatives considered besides a complete pulling of that contract?
President Mulgard, for now, because we don't know what next year is going to look like, the recommendation, and it's really hard to recommend this. This is just has been a wonderful part of our system for a while, 5 years, 6 years, and but we feel like because of the uncertainty and the need for reductions, that it's necessary at this time.
Okay. Board members? My guess is that nobody wants to talk about this because it's very sad and nobody wants to make the motion or talk about it. That's because they...
I would make the motion that we approve this reduction for now, understanding that we do so with reluctance and are hopeful that we'll be able to review all of these reductions favorably in the coming months.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that I do notice about this contract is it is something you can add a little later on in the year if we need to. So to me it's not like it has to be in place by August or not at all. And so it gives me some hope that we could bring some of it back if we have the funds to do so.
Okay, all right, good point, good point.
I agree.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
All right, trustee Morgan seconds. Any further discussion on this? Okay, then we'll call the question. All those in favor of discontinuing the contract with reluctance and hope that we can renew it someday soon. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention?
Yeah, I abstain.
Trustee Fernandez abstains.
Can I ask a follow-up question, not specifically about that contract, but are we done with that motion, President Mulgard?
We are.
I'm wondering what's the plan, Superintendent Cuban, for reviewing these reductions that we made once we have some more clarity on the federal and state level about what our funding levels really will be? Do you have a timeline or a thought in mind about that?
Well, the state is supposed to pass a budget by June 15th, I believe. Steve, is that number correct? Yeah, June 15th. And so we'll know more after that. And our thinking is that we'd bring, unless we get information at the federal level sooner than that, we probably wouldn't have another discussion until August. And I know at the last meeting you requested a process for, if we get more money, how do we bring things back? How do we make decisions like that? So at that time, we'd work collaboratively with the board president to develop something that we'd bring back in August when we have more information.
Okay, so if I'm remembering correctly, we're waiting for both the finalized state budget, but the finalized state budget is somewhat dependent on what happens at the federal level, which honestly probably won't happen by June 15th. I mean, it could, but probably won't. So we're looking.
Yeah, that is possible. And they're also saying that at the state level, because, tax deadlines were extended, that we may know more at the state level in August and September as well. So
we could be looking even as late as September, suddenly saying, actually, we have more money.
That is true.
Okay. That's hard for us, but good to know.
It is. And what we'll have to look at the multi-year projection with it as well, as you all know. But our hope is that we get some more money, and that coupled with some of these reductions of materials and such, coupled with not filling some positions, will take care of it. That's what we're hoping for. But there's so much uncertainty.
Okay, thank you.
And did any other staff want to comment on anything? Sometimes someone moves forward and I think they want to speak, and it's so hard to tell on the Zoom. So don't be bashful. Don't be bashful. Well, that is our main item for tonight, and we are ready to adjourn. I especially like the cat walking behind our CSEA president, Lisa Rantola. That is a lovely visual there. We're going to be meeting on, our upcoming meeting is
June 15th.
June 15th. Okay.
No, June 18th. June 18th.
June 18th. And we will, at that time, one agenda item that came from here is the item about the 2 school resource officers.
Yes.
We want to address that at that meeting as well. Would we want to
Is that
P9 program as well?
Sorry, can I just clarify that? Because is that because the MOU or whatever agreement we have in place will also be coming back at that time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, thank you. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.